Hello there, and welcome to what is probably a bit of a follow-up to a video I did about a week ago. If you haven't seen that one, kind of pointless because I'm going to go through it all again in this one. And that is on the Texas class. I did a video about this when I first saw it appear in Star Trek Lower Decks. It's a fully automated drone ship of some description. It is either remote controlled in some way or it is capable of being fully automated. But we didn't know much about it. Now, in my early speculation, I thought this was probably some kind of combat vessel. We do know that Starfleet now, as we've got a bit more information on the ship, was intending to basically use ships like this to save lives. Now, we've known that Starfleet could build robot ships since the 22nd century without it being a problem, but the whole point of space exploration was for humanity to go to the stars, not just send probes. They'd rather go themselves and have a look. They'd rather experience it and see it. It's very human of them, so that's the whole point. So Starfleet kind of shuns away from this kind of technology, but every now and again flirts with it. And we're going to have a closer look at the Texas class now that we know a little bit more about it. And I absolutely freaking love this ship, even though it's not a good idea, obviously, but still, they had a go. This vessel was originally developed some point in the 2370s, at least in early concepts, by a then Lieutenant Commander Les Buenamingo, a man that would eventually become Vice Admiral Buenamingo, supposedly an ally to the crew of the California class USS Cerritos, but would turn out to be, like many admirals in Starfleet, kind of corrupt, kind of dangerous, and kind of insane. Seems to be a problem. They need to really look at who they're promoting. In the cutthroat world of the Admiralty of Starfleet, it seems that being ruthless and a narcissist is kind of an advantage. The vessel first became active in 2381 as far as we know, although it had earlier shakedown cruises. There were at least 3 of this class, but I should point out that we still haven't seen the USS Texas, so it is possible that there is one original prototype, as the tradition is that the class takes its name from the first ship of the class. Now, it's possible that early prototype was so much a prototype it was simply decommissioned, and the follow-up vessels like the Aledo were complete replacements for it, but we don't know that. The vessel was extremely well armed. As I speculated, it was some kind of combat vessel. Well, this was actually more complicated than that. It was actually a multi-role spacecraft designed to take on many of the duties that Starfleet had previously given to manned vessels. The vessel had the capacity to pick up what are generally referred to as second contact missions, having the ability to interact with individuals as well as have onboard industrial prefabrication facilities and probably industrial replicators and powerful transporters to take on the minor missions and basically buzzing around the Federation kind of missions that other ships like the California class traditionally pick up. A massive advantage in saving lives and time and manpower to allow officers to man ships like the mighty Sovereigns. But here's where we get a little bit of a problem from what we can see. Much of the early software for this craft, now remember, Starfleet, although not as extreme as the Romulans in this, is a little hesitant when it comes to creating artificial life in this regard. Look at the hoops that Data had to jump through, for example. And we'll get to another prime example of it in a moment. The original base coding for this craft was created by a then cadet, Sam Rutherford, who would eventually go on to be a member of the crew of the USS Cerritos. He's a gifted programmer, but sometimes gets a little overzealous. He created the program Badgie, supposedly a tool to help people learn and develop and progress and relax, basically an aid, but it turned out to be corrupt and dangerous. But because he used the base programming for Badgie, which was, he didn't know this, the same base programming that had been created for the Texas class inherited several of the basic flaws that Rutherford only identified in Badgie after he saw it fully operational and how it went offline. Much like Skynet, as soon as this thing became fully autonomous, it went crazy. As we saw basically from its creator. Whether he was aware or unaware of these flaws is kind of hard to say because he himself, let's face it, was a little bit crazy. And once he activated the ship, his first order was for it to attack the USS Cerritos because he was crazy. He basically became the very enemy to the thing that he was supposedly trying to do, save lives. He was planning to use the USS Aledo to attack another Federation starship and murder its crew, and there's no other way of putting it. That was exactly his intention. What he got was far worse. As soon as the Aledo had autonomy, just like Badgie, it went batshit crazy and started attacking the space station. It killed its creator immediately, and then would go after the Cerritos because Rutherford was on board and it basically wanted its other creator. Basically, it had daddy issues, a bit like Badgie. It was a little obsessed with its creator and wishing to destroy him. There's a parallel to Nomad or even V'ger in that, in human programming, basically imbuing something of yourself into the machine makes the machine a little bit perhaps too much like you and wants to be you. It's like, just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should. To quote not Ian Malcolm, and I'm actually quoting the Federation president there from the 22nd century, look it up. And yeah, this ship was very powerful, extremely maneuverable, and didn't have many of the drawbacks of an organic crew on board, allowing it to be more maneuverable, dedicate more power to defensive, offensive, and other such systems like propulsion and deflectors, because it didn't need to keep a crew alive or worry about inertial dampeners as much, other than the damage it would perform to the equipment if it was doing such hectic maneuvers. It basically would have to could keep them at a lower level, not having to worry about squishy organics on board. Now, as I said, once these ships were activated, they began attacking the space station, and selflessly, the captain and crew of the USS Cerritos distracted the ships and drew their attention away while they figured out what to do about them. Attempting to engage them, they used their warp core to destroy 2 of them, but 1 ship survived. Now, it should be pointed out that the California class is not a warship, it's not a combat vessel, it's not very well armed, and what happens, it does have a quite weak. To take on just a single one of these ships took an entire fleet of California class starships coming together to combine their firepower. We saw that a Sovereign class vessel couldn't match a squadron of Texas class vessels, and a Sovereign class is one of the most powerful ships in the fleet. Now, that's not to say Starfleet couldn't have hunted these ships down and destroyed them eventually, but the damage they could have done in the meantime, unthinkable. And who knows what other capabilities these ships had. Onboard holograms they could project off, things that they could replicate or produce, or even androids on board that they were able to remote operate. Who knows? I'm just speculating there, but I'm just saying they go as far as to make these things self-repairing and self-autonomous. You'd have to give them something on board to affect some of the manual repairs that sometimes might perhaps be needed. So I can see there being some kind of machines or holograms on board used to assist in such modifications. Eventually the vessels were of course destroyed, which is actually a great shame because the design itself was excellent. And, you know, rip out that computer and you've kind of maybe still got a fantastic little ship at your disposal, which is why I say the USS Texas could still be out there, or perhaps even others. Starfleet clearly still going to have the design specs for this thing. But as I was saying, like getting back to it, Starfleet has sort of dabbled with the idea of automated ships before, always to its chagrin to a degree. It was often making a machine to do a man's job takes something away from the man, to quote, sort of paraphrase the Baku there. And we saw it much earlier with the M5, when Daystrom created the M5 computer, again with the same impetus to save lives, and that same computer, once it had controlled the ship, went nuts, and its logic programming simply meant, oh, I'm being attacked, I destroy the things that are attacking me, basically. And it's like, oh shit, there's people on board that don't care. And it basically had to be defeated. And I also like that, I should point out that the computer system that Vice Admiral Buenamingo was using was actually very reminiscent of the same control panel system which was used by the M5. Don't know whether or not the two systems were related. It's possible that some of his research was based on the M5 computer, perhaps a great grandchild of it. Another exceptional example of AI gone awry would be the control computer used by Section 31 in the early 23rd century. This system, again, terrible. The drone ships, although originally they weren't drone ships, I should point out that it was then controlling, it had managed to gain control of, were immensely dangerous once under the control of a malevolent computer system. Basically, humans need to stop building AI computer systems because they keep trying to kill us and everyone else in the galaxy. Control would have tried to destroy everything. Seriously, just stop trying to make bloody AI controlled ships. You clearly can't. Data's a fluke, right? B4 was an idiot, Lore is evil, and the synths that were on Mars burned the planet. I know it wasn't them, but they were clearly susceptible to infiltration. Stop making these things! It's clearly not a good idea. Other races have tried, the Prelor and the Kravik, and were wiped out by their own creations. There are other examples. It's likely whoever made the Borg, although technically, strictly speaking, not a fully AI, they were probably absorbed by their own creation. It ain't a good idea. But the ship, in and of itself, is, I think, a work of art. It's a beautiful little compact, multi-role space frame that would probably be very useful if put in the hands of actual crew members rather than perhaps the bastard great-grandchild of the M5 or Badgie or Control or whatever you want to call it. This thing, basically, it was just never meant to be. But with that said, tell me what you think of the Texas class. Do you think it's actually a good idea for Starfleet, humanity, and the Federation to continue to pursue this line of development? We do know that by the 32nd century, Starfleet, although it's greater automation, is still putting people on its ships, as is the United Earth, which at that time was separate from the rest of the Federation for some reason, and Starfleet for some reason, whatever. Do you think it's a good idea? Should they continue it? Maybe they're just getting it wrong. They just need to look at the programming. Maybe create a better ethical subroutine like Data's creator, Singh, did. Soon, rather. Singh? Ooh, not him. But as we've discussed, typically Starfleet tends to mess this up. Is it just a fault of the Admiralty corrupting it? Is it the fault of the avarice of the engineers and their pride and their ego being imbued within the machine that they create? Or is it just doomed to failure? Let me know in the comments below, and that is the end of this video. I'd just like to say a thank you to everyone for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoy making these. If you did enjoy it, please consider giving a like, share, and a subscribe, and maybe checking out the other videos on the screen right now, and in the description box below there are links to my other social media accounts.